We're not hearing anything.
Jen, is that better?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay.
Maybe go back to the beginning.
Okay.
At the beginning now.
We can do that.
Sorry about that.
All right, we're starting over.
Of course, I was waving my arms and my video wasn't even on. So if
We're
you
all
could
winning.
start over, that'd be
It's fine.
fabulous.
Okay, so again, thanks for coming to this session on civic engagement at SUNY Oswego. The goal of the session is just kind of give an overview of where we are right now in terms of kind of some priorities and definitions we're looking at for civic engagement on campus, particularly focused on teaching. So we're going to do some introductions, talk about the context of doing this work this fall, talk a little bit about those definitions and priorities, talk about how to respect your own kind of constraints and limits in doing this work, talk a little bit about resources available, and then hopefully have a good bulk of time for questions. So first, I want to gauge of where everybody is. So I need to know, which Leslie Nope are you today? 4?
I don't know what's going on in 3 over there.
This is a sandwich.
Is it 3 now? Because like, okay. And then after 3, I think 8 is what you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I've basically been moving between 7 and 6, like pretty steadily, back and forth. Jen, how about you?
Yeah, I'm a 5'6". I'm home with a sick kid. So yep.
Okay, yeah, 6. All right, I know where everybody's at, right, for this conversation. I don't think this really helps anyone who's feeling like a 7, but at the moment, these are kind of the problems that when I'm thinking about why civic engagement work on a college campus is kind of part of our obligation, it's these 3 things that stick out to me. Like, we are operating as an institution of higher education during a period when we face significant problems that require citizens with expertise, ethical reasoning, communication skills, etc. We're facing the rise of authoritarianism at home and abroad. At the same time, we've got an actual decline in commitment to democratic values. The declines are actually really sharp among young Americans, and support for authoritarianism is rising among young Americans. And we've got a loss of public forums and cross-cutting networks that provide exposure to a range of perspectives and experience, frankly, developing the skills that are what are required to make a democracy function. This is a 2023 study from Pew where they basically just asked people what word or phrase they would use to describe politics in the United States. And the size of the circle is how often that's a word that came up, right? So when our students come in and we try to talk to them about like what is happening in the world, this is what they're coming from, right? Divisive, bad, messy, crazy, corrupt, chaos, joke. And people really are in this kind of fight or flight. And I actually think for a lot of students in particular, it's freeze, right? It's just like, even if I want to do something, the idea of engaging politically to do something it shuts them down. So that's kind of the context in which we are looking at civic engagement. And so I want to be very clear that at this stage as a campus, we basically work off the definitions of civic engagement that I like. Hopefully we will be doing more of a kind of collaborative work on that in the next little bit. I use Thomas Ehrlich's 2000 definition. He's one of the top kind of national guys in the civic engagement space. And he defines civic engagement as working to make a difference in the civic skills of our communities and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation to make that difference. It's promoting the quality of life in a community through both political and non-political processes. What I like about this definition is that it's really inclusive. So political engagement, community engagement, service learning are all there, but it's a lot bigger than voter engagement and service learning. And that tends to be on college campuses. The thing that we default to is the 2 places that we talk about civics. And it makes it possible to incorporate a really wide range of issues, questions, and skill sets. Just to kind of position where faculty are in this and kind of courses are in this, we've kind of settled on 4 long-term civic engagement priorities, a couple of which I think are really clearly linked to faculty. So the first one, providing opportunities for civic learning through connecting disciplinary and career interests to civic questions. linking personal values to civic and political positions, and facilitating conversations. The second point, and that's actually part of what this series, what CELT is for, is broadening and deepening the capacity of faculty, staff, and students. I think we often think about student capacity, but faculty capacity is also, and staff capacity for this work is really important. Institutionalizing things, and then finally developing kind of the commitment to and capacity for these conversations on campus. Any questions so far? Comments, thoughts? Cool.
So
Okay.
that's good.
Okay. So A Crucible Moment came out in 2012, and it basically comes from a White House National Task Force where there was real concern in sort of 2007, 2008, 2009 about declining democratic participation among young people. So they charter a national task force, and this remains kind of like the gold standard of like a major report about the responsibility of higher education to democracy. And I really like, and I think they kind of distill part of what they're saying in this quotation, that really there's just a difference between what higher education has an obligation to do in a democratic country and in an undemocratic country. And sort of if we as an institution are focusing on creating like people widgets to go fit a labor market, we are a university for an undemocratic country. And that we should take seriously that distinction. Just to highlight for folks. Before we move forward, there are a few legitimate bright lines about politics. So you cannot provide any form of incentive for voter registration or casting a ballot. I often have to deal, I would say most years, I end up having to field some stuff on this. Like, you can't offer students extra credit. You can't do the sort of like, I made cookies, and if you show me your I voted sticker, you can have one. Like, any of that stuff is actually inducement to voting, and it's voter fraud. So you can't.
Question about that.
Yeah.
So I teach a course with civic action items, and one of them is registering to vote. So if I'm giving them a grade,
As long as there's options for a ton of other stuff that they could do,
Yeah.
that's that, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the same thing. Like, we do voter education stuff where we're like, hey, come take this quiz. And like, when you're done, like, everybody who stops at the table gets a cookie. Also, we're going to hardcore try to get you to register to vote. But as long as we don't not give the cookies to everybody, it's fine. Yeah.
I just don't give them a grade if they don't do it. So,
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah. So we're going to have a session on academic freedom later this semester, next month. But the real place where you can get in trouble on academic freedom is if, as part of discussing an issue, you actively degrade or disparage a student's views. So saying a position is wrong, totally appropriate. Saying to a student, you are stupid, not appropriate. Like, it's like the very kinds of things you would expect would get you in trouble in the classroom, also will get you in trouble in an academic freedom kind of context. There is higher scrutiny if and when the discussion is commenting on partisan affiliation as opposed to political problems, views, and topics. So when you're in the kind of like, this is a public problem that we're going to discuss and think about how a discipline addresses it, easy. When you're in the space of dividing down, what does each political party propose about that thing? I would argue you should absolutely still do that. That's totally fair game. But that's where it starts getting like a little bit more, you have to manage the conversation potentially a little bit more, to ensure that folks are being respectful of other people's views. Okay. I'm not going to read each of those. I'm just going to leave them up for a period of time. The Crucible Moment basically outlines that each campus should be tracking 4 different criteria or axes and thinking through this kind of the civic status of their campus. So the first one is civic ethos, which I really think about as kind of like how we do things. Like, is there a civic ethos in shared governance? Is there a civic ethos in how the student association functions, right? So these very kind of like dispositions and institutional practices in civic ethos. Civic literacy has 2 parts. It's kind of exactly the stuff that you think it is. Like, do students understand how politics works is the first half, which is often referred to as political knowledge. The second half, I actually think, is where most, if not all, disciplines have something to say, which is that last section on the ability to think critically about complex issues and to seek and evaluate information about issues that have public consequences. There's a lot of issues that have public consequences that, frankly, political scientists should not comment on. I don't want us to talk about, I don't know, how to build better infrastructure. We can talk about the process by which you might decide to assign a contract, but I don't think I'm in the best position to like decide what kind of bridge is best or to help students understand that. We've got faculty on this campus who are way better suited to that than I am, right? And so actually thinking through how do you connect a discipline to thinking about evaluative judgments that you might make in your discipline is actually being a form of civics, because it can set you up to make consequential public choices. Civic inquiry is the other one that I think really clearly connects, and they explicitly say it should be integrated in general education. So this is thinking about the civic dimensions and public consequences of a subject of study, right? So thinking about kind of the implication of choices within your discipline on different constituencies on the planet, considering intellectual debates in your area of study. And then civic action is much more, again, that traditional like behaviors question. Okay, before I go any further, do any of these sort of particularly strike anybody? Stand out as like, oh, that seems like the one that I could be game for, that overlaps with the kind of way you think about your work.
So for me, what I'm thinking is just even having the structure put in front of me is already a great start to, because something we've discovered is that we don't say civic engagement. We do all these things that fit.
Yeah.
But we're not actively saying, how does this relate to civic engagement, and how does this affect, maybe we need to talk about whether or not students understand, what we're saying to begin with before we even get to inquiry or action.
Yeah.
So I think this has been very helpful so far. I've been trying out new things in my cinema classes, and one of them is a film shot in Buffalo, New York about 2 girls from Pennsylvania trying to get an abortion in New York City. And how do we guide the conversation? And a lot of the male students are like, I can't even engage in this. It's not for me.
Yeah.
Or we watched Moonlight.
Oh yeah.
And some students are like, yeah, I can't talk about LGBTQ issues. It doesn't involve me. Or just even war and fascism. It's like all of these topics. I'm like, how do I better guide these conversations? Because sometimes I'm nervous. I don't want to do it wrong.
Yeah.
Some kids are clearly getting upset just that we are even talking about it. Like, what does this have to do with film?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, a lot. So yeah, just having some framework to think about how I can safeguard myself, like having some like checks and guidelines is really nice.
Okay.
So
Jen? Anything? I'm the only person who can see you, so. Okay.
Well, I think
I'm
just-
good.
Oh, John can see you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So on the kind of boundaries question, right? And like what you can do. So these are the 3 places that I really advise thinking about constraints when you're trying to plan whether it's like which film, right? Like how many of these films are you kind of game for in a semester? Like how many of these conversations can you kind of feel yourself having? I think about time, risk tolerance, and teaching methods as kind of 3 separate criteria on which to ask about your risk tolerance. And John, I'd be really curious if there's anything you would add to this as somebody who kind of, right? Like I imagine you think about this for faculty all the time. So it sounds like it's Jared, right?
Yes.
Yeah. From what Jared said, right, there's a way of literally thinking like, oh, it wouldn't be adding new class time necessarily. It would literally be how do you frame the thing that you're already doing? And then there's a very easy kind of like low lift on time. But that's different than, I don't know, you're thinking about incorporating a new, right? So for instance, I've talked with a couple different faculty that are actually doing like some brand new stuff this semester. And it turned into like, how much time can I dedicate to this new injection of civics into a class, right? The second one I think is actually the most important, which is what is your own personal risk tolerance? How comfortable are you with open-ended discussions? Introducing controversial topics in a classroom, responding to hot moments. I actually think it's really important to think about these as both being about your personal risk tolerance and being about your positionality in the university. So I'm frankly willing to like, I just think it's different when if you're an adjunct, I think it's reasonably different. When you're pre-tenure, I think it's reasonably different. And I think the level of confidence you have in your department chair and in your dean to back you up also really matters. So I have a very clear profile of like, this is the thing that I do. Everybody knows this is the thing that I do. And so I have a pretty good amount of confidence. Like I have the record and sort of the confidence from folks at the institution that I'd be okay. I think that becomes an open question to kind of think about for yourself. And then finally, I think it's about teaching methods. So is there a difference in the kind of conversational method that's working for students when you discuss films that they see as for them or obviously about film, and the kind of conversation you're trying to have when it's something different? And if it's exactly the same, how do you use that to basically set this, like help the students understand that like actually the method I'm asking you to engage in is precisely the same method? And so how do you transfer those skills? And again, it's a little bit more like, can you just make it really clear to them that you're transferring the exact same skills from one conversation to the next? And this is also kind of, if for folks that tend to be in classes that are less discussion heavy, figuring out how you bring it in, right? So one of the things I encourage is sort of like, if you're doing case studies, do you include questions about impact on a local community in the case study? If it's a case study about how a business does thing X, Y, and Z. If you're doing data sets, do you ever think about making those data sets on like civic content, on public question content, simply as a kind of like exposure, right, to students of the material? What do you guys think about these? Am I missing something? Where would you kind of think about putting yourself?
Right in the center here, apologizing if, and I really appreciate the parenthetical there, when you miss the discussion. You know, because Tiffany already mentioned this, but I mean, especially when we first started teaching, and we talk a lot in the classroom, and you know, it's going to happen, and then sometimes you don't even realize it in the moment, and it's the next class you come in and you just immediately have to get in front of it and you know, own what you may have said or not said. And and I want to say that of course that's okay. You know, hopefully what you said wasn't so bad, you know, but right, you know, that's an important note right there.
Yeah, it seems so simple when it's in front of me. But I'm thinking,
It's harder in the moment.
I'm
Yeah.
also thinking like when I did World Cinema, I did 14 weeks of pretty intense films.
Yeah.
And it was probably one of my hardest semesters. And then last semester I did film genre, which like we did slashers and film noir. And then the last 4 weeks I did independent films, which is where we watched films about abortion and gay rights. And it was like, okay, that like eased it up because everybody was like comfortable talking about Halloween and slashers. And then when we got to the complicated stuff,
Right.
like pin drop conversations done. But
Sorry,
it wasn't as intense as trying to do it all semester.
Yeah.
So, like,
and spending time, you know, building the relationship with the students and hopefully building a cohort amongst, you know, the student body. It goes a long way in creating a space where you can have the harder conversations.
Yeah, like we're watching comedies now and like people are talking and laughing and maybe doing the difficult stuff at the end. Like, it feels natural, but then actually putting it on paper, it's like, oh yeah, this makes so much sense. So and then just, I don't know how often as faculty we ask ourselves, like, how much can we really, like, because we feel like we have to do these things and we have goals to achieve.
We have to deliver, and we don't, right? We don't often, you know, say how much can we deliver, how quickly, you know, at what frequency.
Yeah.
So
you can't deliver if your soul is crushed halfway through spring.
Yes. Right. I actually saw, I'm going to try to get something out on it for this campus, but I saw, I was at my national disciplinary conference last week. And I saw a paper at our teaching and learning conference from a political theorist who's using Snyder's On Tyranny for her intro text. It's just this kind of like, it's like 20 ideas to like respond to like defending democracy, but it's not the stuff you think it is. It's things like learn how to make small talk. Right? It's like the idea, like that her whole pitch is this kind of like the classroom is actually a space of democratic practice. That when we ask students to practice being in community in a classroom, we are actually asking them to practice democracy. And I found that that kind of civic ethos question, which I never thought about for a classroom, but I'm trying to use it a little bit to help myself think through those, like in the weeks where I feel like maybe we're not digging in, like, but if I do all of this other stuff first, they'll be better prepped for some of the trickier conversations I want them to have. It's because I'm actually helping them figure out how to practice democracy before I ask them to do the harder part.
Okay, so this is called Snyder's.
It's Snyder's On Tyranny. The woman is teaching, she teaches it for her intro theory class using a graphic novel version. And it seems lovely. I just ordered the book after I like heard her talk, but I loved having this idea of it framed that kind of like why the work that you do before you do the hard stuff, quote unquote, right? Is also the work of civic engagement. Right? That like, if you think about it as like, it's building classroom community, it's doing all of these things, but if done in a way where the students are taking ownership for it, it is actually getting them to practice developing a civic ethos in the room. So that then when the trickier conversations come, they're better prepared to be democratic citizens in the classroom. I don't know. Other things?
I hadn't thought about that either, but it's a really
It
good
was
way of
so
framing
good.
it. And it's good teaching practice.
Yes, it was one of those moments where somebody kind of explained a teaching practice in a way where I've heard, you know, we talk about these things all the time, but it's connected to kind of student success. And it's not that I don't care about that, but it doesn't connect. It doesn't connect to the things that I really kind of get excited by in the classroom. And having it framed that way was so, because then she also talked about this is how she has a no cell phone policy, is because if having no if being in communication with one another, like learning how to make small talk is a skill, and it's a democratic skill, and it's a skill students need to practice. You're actually doing something by intentionally asking them to put their cell phones down 2 minutes before class starts to look somebody else in the eye and ask them how they're doing. I was like, that's fascinating. Like, I'm on board for that.
We do that. I mean, do you do that in class?
Cell phones haven't been banned this year.
Well, I mean, just the 2 to 5 minutes before class starts, pulling up a seat, sitting in front of them, saying, "How are you?
Yeah.
You know, and what are you looking forward to?" Tell me, you know.
Yeah, I do it with individual students, but I haven't really tried to get. I've tried very awkwardly and horribly, right? To like get them to do it together. And I can push through it being awkward for me.
Right.
To like, but then the result is that I like get really good relationships with like 4 kids. And that also feels weird, right? Like it becomes a little bit funny. So I feel like I'm gonna have to redouble my efforts. But, yeah. Okay, quick one. I wanted to flag a set of big national resources. I actually have a civic pedagogy resources drive available on Google Drive that I can add anybody to who wants it. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. So there's a couple things that I'm guessing might be good fits for you guys. And it's the Project Pericles. Are you guys familiar with them?
I'm not.
Okay. So Project Pericles is a national organization. They have a set of campuses that are like Pericles campuses. We are not one of them, but they maintain an amazing database of syllabi and course assignments that connect to civic concepts that are developed by faculty, and it's searchable by discipline.
That sounds awesome.
Which I adore.
Right?
And so you can get everything from like, here is my full course that does thing X, here's a short assignment that does thing X. It's really helpful. Couple things for mathematics, for science and civics, and then the civic prompts guides from AAC and U are in there. That is basically a document that is designed to help departments walk through what kinds of civic content is appropriate for us as a program. And so to kind of do like a bigger guided conversation about like, what would it look like for us to do this work? And I think that's it. Oh, I held it to 30 minutes. My goal was 30 minutes of content, and then having 30 minutes to kind of talk through like questions, feedback, what folks are struggling with, if there are resources I can help find for folks. This is the space I swim in for all of my research. And so it's like, I'm more than happy to like hunt things down for people and help with stuff.
I have a question,
Yeah.
not directly related.
This is fine.
AAC and you.
Yeah.
Does Oswego have a partnership with Jared? And I want to go to a conference, and it looks like the fee is phenomenal.
Fees for AC and you are rough.
So
They are, yeah,
Yeah.
but I think we have some sort of relationship with them. I know we've done some programs with them, been participants in some of their programs. I'm not sure if the college is a member or if we just participated in some
Yeah.
of the work.
We're an Ask You member,
Right.
Yeah.
but I don't know about AAC and you.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's with SUNY that we did more of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I like AAC, like I use their rubrics all the time, the AAC and U stuff. I think they like
They have
those
some good
value
stuff.
rubrics are incredible. Yeah.
we'll keep searching.
Yeah. Yes. I'm really curious about your Sterling, like the Sterling documentary. Like that seemed like such a great civic project.
It was, and earlier when I mentioned that we do this, like for us when we first civic engagement, you know, we weren't, like I was saying before, we weren't using these words, and then we started paying attention a little more and realizing that, you know, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the way we talked about the Sterling documentary was that we're giving voice to so many people that, you know, they had this incredible fight to build something, and they're, you know, and like the struggles and like the great and wonderful stories we're all familiar with, where you have everyday people who are suddenly visited upon by like an incredible power, and how do you fight that power? And and Tiffany and I have been enjoying the results of that fight that these other people did, you know, so many years ago, and so we've essentially like lived in this sunshine, right? Like this beautiful environment that other people fought for, and we didn't know about it. So we were, you know, when Laura asked us about doing this project, and I mean, the answer was a clear yes for us. And then the more we discovered and the more people we spoke to and learned their stories, it, you know, it was very rewarding. And then we're like, okay, we're starting to have a much more practical understanding of what civic engagement is here. And okay, cool.
Right, yeah, so we had both been taking our students to the Nature Center for a long time. We knew June from Ontario Orchard. She's helped us out with pumpkins that we've carved for students.
Nice.
And when Laura came to us, it was like a chance to give back to the Nature Center. Of course, we love them. And yeah, civic engagement wasn't a term that we used. It was just, we want to do something good for people that are good.
Yeah.
And we can do this thing for them. So let's do it. And then, yeah, then this term came up. Then we somehow ended up at SU, and we're like, okay, the stuff that we try to do and that we struggle with because we know it's important, but there doesn't seem to be, at least in our cinema area, there's not a lot of help guiding us to talk about these difficult conversations with students.
Okay.
And like how to sort of field questions, keep the conversation on track,
Yeah.
keep emotions like in control. And you don't like often think about that with film.
Yeah.
So at least, you know, when I started too, and civic engagement, and I'm excited to go to this website with the syllabi, and where you said we can search by
Yeah.
discipline. It feels like there's a lot of resources to really help us structure the things that we're already doing in class
Yeah.
and make them better, and hopefully alleviate some of the tensions that we feel talking about these issues.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Hopefully Project Pericles has. I will say I've never searched for cinema.
I know, so
Project Pericles.
maybe we'll have to add things.
We'll just have to contribute.
Yeah. But yeah, the Sterling thing was awesome, and it really,
And
yeah.
we were able to secure some grant funding to pay students, so.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just, Tiffany and I and other faculty members, working at this, we're showing students how to take their craft and, we can say it differently, like, do good things in the world with your skills. But how do you say do good things in the world? And so far, that's what I'm seeing that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
That's
and I know
great.
we were all overwhelmed, like, we had planned for 40 people, I think, at the opening
Oh,
night.
for the audience?
Yeah, for the
Yeah.
people and like the students, like, I was so glad that they were there, because I was like, I'm overwhelmed, but they're overwhelmed, I'll
Yeah.
be strong for them. But yeah, and then just looking at the audience, it was like, wow, all these people really care. This is awesome.
That's great. What are you guys gonna do out of the glacier? Were there specific like projects coming out of the glacier?
So
trip?
we're in the final stages of submitting. All the participants are submitting towards the compendium, and
cool.
so everyone's sort of in their final stages there. And there was actually just a meeting that we had to miss, but because we had other engagements. But so we're not entirely sure exactly what that's going to look like for everyone. Tiffany and I are working on a short film project. We'd like to do some writing if there's time, but that's always how it goes if there's time. But yeah, and I know that we're looking forward to it next year, and it's kind of cool because from what I understand, they're essentially rebooting the stewardship of public
Yeah.
lands project because like so many other things, COVID and the pandemic just sort of kind of shattered it, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I wasn't there, but so they're essentially rebooting it, and it's really cool to be part of that. They have new members running the show, and new people, such as Tiffany and myself participating, new location. So
Yeah.
the whole program seems to be in redevelopment. So it's really cool to be part of that.
Yeah, and Kathy, Steve, I think someone else, we put together a panel to go to AAC. in
Oh,
New York.
nice.
It's the panel, teaching science and the humanities, like combining them.
Oh,
So
that's
if
great.
the panel gets accepted, that's why we're like, oh, that
Oh.
membership. Because
Well, I did look it up, and AACNU named soon as we go a Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation Campus Center, but that's
Oh.
a categorization. I don't know if that means we have any sort of membership in them. Perhaps not.
Interesting though.
worthy of a
Okay.
discount.
That was in 2022. So,
All
so
right.
there was at least some connection.
So,
there.
right, some recognition or okay.
Right, so we figure if we hear back and the panel is accepted, then we'll start searching for funds.
Yeah. I've had luck asking the provost office
Okay.
for the kind of civic engagement national, like for ADP, that's how I've gone
Okay.
in the past. And then you like basically that plus my UEP.
Exactly.
I
That's
got
how we
money
got
is
to-
how I,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's also the union too as a possible source of some funds if not everything's covered.
Do any of the online folks have questions? I've been trying to keep an eye out for hands and haven't seen anything.
I don't think any questions. It's been helpful though. Thank you. I feel like the stereotype of the young person, or I don't really think about civic engagement a lot. And I don't do a lot with it in my day-to-day, in terms of work, except for like stuff on legislative districts. So a world I'm not thinking about. And thinking now about how to, I don't know, it's important work, and it's like a public university, like the voting power we have of all these students, like there's gotta be a way to talk about it more data wise.
Yeah, I mean, I have thoughts. I think we are actually dramatically undercounting the civic content that we do. And part of it is like, has anybody talked to you guys about contributing to the Carnegie reclassification, Carnegie Community Engagement reclassification?
Is that
I don't
thing
think so.
Scott sent out?
No.
Okay.
Right? So those are sort of like, that should be, I would argue, would be the other second project. I think Jen left. Right. So like, we have that theoretic like CE code for classes, but most of us teach civic engagement in classes, not because it's like that class's always going to be civic engagement. It's because you have a project for a semester where it makes sense for that class to incorporate particular things. And I don't actually think we're collecting that at all. And am I wrong about that? Like, I don't think we actually have a count of like where in the curriculum civic engagement is.
So it's not.
No, nothing I've ever seen.
Okay, does this become part of gen eds, like?
So we're on the way. So the newest gen ed that went into effect this year has US history and civic engagement. I just,
Okay.
I don't love that it's US history and civic engagement.
Mhm.
I do think that there's a lot of space for disciplines outside of history and political science to have courses in there that we haven't taken advantage of. And I'd be more than happy to chat with folks who'd be interested in figuring out like what could be, like humanities classes should be all over that category. So there's that. And then the chancellor has basically said that there will be a new infused competency for civic discourse in a democracy. So that I think is coming. I think look for calls about campus conversations about how we plan to do that coming soon. Because that's going to get infused the same way like information literacy and critical thinking are infused. I think every major is going to have. Am I wrong? That's how I understand
I've
it.
only heard rumors. of
Okay.
this. I haven't seen. anything.
Okay. Oh, I have seen the draft
Okay.
Oh, okay.
content.
When do you think we'll hear more about this civic discourse in democracy?
I'm guessing within 2 FAs from now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is. next year.
Yeah. So if this goes through, the expectation is that everybody's implementing it in fall of 25.
Oh.
So
Okay, Jared and I are building a minor, I don't know if we.
yes, I've heard about this.
We want it to launch in fall of 25.
So it could be.
Yeah.
embedded.
Yes. So getting this embedded in a minor would be,
Yes,
Yeah.
and our minor is, I don't know if we're sold on this, but like eco-media studies. So, how do students learn about environment, like how do they receive environmental media and how do they
Yeah.
create their own? And one of our
Okay.
courses is environmental communication and storytelling.
oh yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
I think maybe.
That would fit well.
Yeah. You'd be able to get it in there.
Okay, and maybe
Yeah.
we need some feedback with the eco-media studies. I think I like the title, but it's just, there's so many things going on and it just, I'm backing away now.
I noticed. So we changed the name once already, but okay.
It was environmental humanities and visual media.
I think that's what I had heard about before was the
Right.
environmental humanities.
That
It's-
became eco-media.
We really like environmental humanities and visual media because it clearly says what we're working with, and the environmental humanities part is so essential. And but our feedback so far is that people, we kind of lose them somewhere's in there, maybe in the middle, I don't know, but
We lost students. They got to humanities and said, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
it sounds difficult.
Yeah.
Media seems less.
You
so,
know,
so, yeah.
they know
Yeah.
media, like, and it's like, I get it, you know, it's cool, like, you know.
But also when we tried to set up internships, when we talked to different groups.
Yeah.
The name like eco-media, like PBS was like, yeah, but environmental
get it.
humanities.
Right.
So,
Okay, so maybe that is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
so it has to be
Yeah.
something faster to say.
I bet you could also get, I bet there's a class in there that you could get the US history and civic engagement
That would.
Um,
gen ed on.
Almost
I'd be
100%.
surprised.
We talk about history of national parks,
Yeah.
and how certain people, in particular certain presidents, have changed how we view the natural environment over the
Yeah.
past so many years. So
There's a new book out from University Press of Kansas on national parks, the
Oh,
like
really?
political construction and history of national parks that
Okay.
you might
Okay.
want to check out.
I'm just keeping, that's why I keep checking my phone. I have a text message here that I'm actually sending to Tiffany, and I'm just filling it with my notes so that we're both on page, on the
What,
same
you don't
page
want
later.
this?
These are great. They're wonderful. Except if you go to our house, we each have we have a big like home office, and we each have our desks, and they're full of these. And then
Yes.
Finding those is much harder than finding
Right?
something
That's
that-
my
Yeah.
husband refers to mine as my 20th century iPad. And I have stacks of them.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't think these notes go to this.
Exactly. And if it's a text, when we're in the car, we can, look at it, or when we're just, when we have 5 minutes of spare time, it's like, oh yeah, hey, what about this? And that's what it is now. It's no longer having the meetings and long discussions. It's just what can we sneak in those little moments. So
Yeah, it'd be great to get. Yeah, I think there's a lot of civic engagement crossover, which then will have very specific gen ed possibilities.
Okay.
I did like the way Brian Newsbury began his talk. with
So
civic
good.
engagement. It tied in really nicely.
Yes.
To this.
Was he
Yeah.
our speaker?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was great.
He was so good.
He was great, yeah.
Yeah. Apropos not of civic engagement, but of that, have you looked at a remarkable? I'm trying to switch myself over.
What is it?
A remarkable. We're now just totally off civic engagement.
No taking.
oh,
It's a not backlit paper tablet. Don't turn off.
It's a hybrid of.
It's basically it's a hybrid.
It makes
So
it
like
feel
it
like paper,
does
but
it does PDFs,
oh.
it does ebooks, but it also does like all of the note taking that you would want, like with a
Mm.
stylus, and it will
Mhm.
convert writing to text.
Ooh.
But it doesn't
So
like
it's-
you can't put an app on it. You like can't. It
Okay.
like has no distraction capabilities.
Excellent. That's
Yes.
let's be
And
real.
so-
It's essential.
This is the thing I'm currently functioning with.
Okay.
Okay, I'm totally gonna look into that, because yeah, the distractibility and like the face, yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Peter. Yeah. Anna, if there are measurement things you want to talk about or assessment things, let me know, because or if you want to take a look at, I have the reading list of like other campuses that do campus-wide assessment of civic engagement really well, basically like all stashed in a folder for myself of like one day.
Mhm.
Yes, yes, that'd be great to see. And
Yeah.
I definitely love to hear your perspective. I just need a little more time to. think
Yeah.
through.
Think through, and I'm not like the data collection on my classes. I'm very good at understanding like what the data collection potential is university wide. I barely am to the level of like, yes, I understand what my FTEs are, right? So like I'm not, yeah, but I could definitely pass you the right stuff, I think, to look
Yeah,
at.
that'd be awesome.
Cool. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for hosting this.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. If you could just stop the recording
Mhm.
that way.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Good seeing you.
Bye.
I wasn't recording. You're recording.
Oh, so I will stop the recording. That's right, I am so tired.